what does it mean for you to be a man?
We don't know what this relationship is. We don't know what it looks like. The more we try to figure it out, the more we get stuck. No one ever asked me what I need. I don't even know what I need.
For love to be there, curiosity and vulnerability need to also be there.
You gotta be really careful not to overshare, because it's not their shit, but let them know that we are fallible and that we are always working. What is wrong with me? Why am I afraid to say this? Like, I can do all these other things that take real courage, and here I can't.
Cal, what does it mean for you to be a man? Because before we hit the record button, we kind of like there was no foreplay. We just went straight in. And I really enjoy it. So yeah. I know this is going to be an incredible conversation. So as a man that I immediately respect and admire, what does it mean to be a man?
Well, I think the one piece that is probably true for a lot of men is that kind of wearing that provider hat. And I think it's really easy to get stuck in that, whether you're struggling and you're like, you really truly need to provide, or you've done really well and have this abundance of wealth and resources. You would hope that, oh, okay, I've checked that box. Well, no, there's always more providing, that we can do. And, I've certainly got stuck in that. We've had, some financial freedom for quite a long time, and I find myself looping back into this unconscious kind of commitment to that part of being, a man and being a dad. I mean, truly, when I'm able to integrate kind of all my parts fully, I'm able to show up and let, it's not as hard for me to maybe let my kids in to that vulnerable side, but to really let my wife in. There's a fear, unconscious and conscious, that she may reject me if I don't show up with having it all figured out, all sorted out. And I know particularly recently, that's really become something that has been a roadblock for us. And we've been married coming up on 23 years. And I know we'll get into these kind of new iterations of the relationship, which are really important. But we're coming through this phase of it, it was a challenging end of 2022. And I recognize that there's so much that I'm holding and not letting her into. Part of it is a protection, my idea of protecting her from just the shit I deal with on a daily basis. And I recognize it just creates a wall. She doesn't really know me. She just doesn't. After all these years, she knows parts of me, but those parts that are most vulnerable, like, I don't have it all together.
Yeah.
I'm stressing about this financial thing, and I'm stressing because I think I fucked something up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shame that comes with that. And so then it starts to show up in my sleep, where I wake up, generally always slept great, sleep through the night, wake up feeling really good. And lately I'm just feeling really unsettled around that. And so I think for me, the biggest thing is to not, turn off the provider kind of channel, but to really take that, what does it mean to provide in those ways, but also provide what's in this heart, and can I open it up and give her the opportunity to have her, her connection to it, her reaction to that side of me that I'm maybe not proud of right now.
I love that you share that. It's very salient for me, going through what I'm going through right now as well, in different ways. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't hear these conversations. I didn't hear other dudes talking about this stuff. And I think that's why I'm like, oh, I want to let's poke and prod into this, because I find this really interesting. And I think this is extremely helpful of insights for us to be able to share also. And so with myself, the last few months have been really interesting. So it was a case of We were living in Bali for 9 years. That was a fantastic chapter of our life. I went from, before that we were living in Dubai. Over the last 10 years, it's kind of been this big chapter that's come to a close and starting this new pages of, I'm not even sure what it's really going to be, if I could be really honest with what's going on. And so over the last 10 years, we've had 4 children, 5 pregnancies. I've built a business, sold a company, quite literally have become a new person. And it's only very recently as well, I've actually owned the fact that I was like, oh no, like this is the man that I've wanted to create, and letting go of that old identity and labels that I was hanging on to for far too long that were just like pulling me down like an anchor. But then what was also really interesting, and especially with my marriage with Lauren, my wife, where I'm now seeing her for the woman that she is today, which was profound, because suddenly I'm like, oh my God, like this woman I find incredibly attractive on all the different levels. I was like, this is my queen. This is my empress. I want to serve this with my utter devotion, but also for her to be able to be like, oh, like this is the man that I'm with as well. And her seeing me for who I am today and how we're like reconnecting again. So after over 11 years of marriage, it's now like, this is a brand new relationship. It very much feels like we've got to like literally re-date, re-get to know each other. And it's actually just about spending time. And I appreciate you sharing up like the opening up of the vulnerabilities, because I very much myself have felt like I didn't want to open up and share about things that were going on inside of me, because I didn't want my partner, my wife, to see the flaws inside of me, because the holy shit, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's very easily the shame, the guilt, the feeling of like, well, is she just going to want to walk away? That's a possibility that's there, because I'm not showing up as the person that she wants to be with as well. I want to jump in and say thank you for listening and supporting the show, as at the moment we don't run any ads on the show. And if you're getting value, if you're loving the show, then I invite you right now to share this episode. Share this directly to a friend or share it on your socials. And when you do share it on social, please tag me so I can personally say thank you to you. My social handle is @Chris Dufey. That's Chris Dufey, as it means a huge deal to me, as this show is about us coming together as a community to help each other grow, as I really do believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. So take your screenshot, grab the link and share it with a friend that you think could get value out of this together. It will put a huge smile on my face, and I very much appreciate it. How do you navigate the waters, Cal, when it comes to you now being like, I've got to open up what's inside of here in the marriage?
Yeah, it's kind of scary. And as you said, it's like we have this forward-facing outer, like this is, got it all together. And it's just like these just little doses of opening up and trying her, you know. And actually, I'm going to give her quite a larger dose here in the next day or two. I've been realizing that there's stuff that I'm holding that, you know, the time hasn't been right. We haven't kind of been together, and we've driven in the car. That's not the right time, and but that's coming. So it's a little bigger, kind of a bit bigger dose than I'm comfortable with. But I need to try, and you know, give her the opportunity to feel into that. And I mean, one of the things about my wife Peyton that is, gosh, just so amazing, and I've seen it throughout our relationship, is her tenderness and her ability to really, God, the word that keeps coming to mind is mothering. And it's not like I need her to be my mother, but this ability to make everything okay. And so I just need to trust that is what's on the other side, and if it's not, then that's okay too. Because as there's that the disconnection between what I'm presenting and what I'm feeling, we know that just creates shame and guilt, and that just gets pushed further and further down. So it's not working, that strategy. You know, it's never worked. Maybe in the short term it has, but here we are. You know, I'd say back in 2018, we had a bit of a rebirth for our marriage, and we had another marriage ceremony. It was very spontaneous. It felt right. It was right. It was appreciating who we were for those first 18 years, thanking those two for coming together, and then understanding that we are in different roles now, and like, let's honor that. Now it's less of a kind of, we're not in quite the celebration of that rebirth, but what I've recognized is we're in what would be considered like a meltdown phase, and not like I'm having a panic attack meltdown, but we don't know what this relationship is. We don't know what it looks like, and the more we try to figure it out, the more we get stuck. And so can we just be okay with not knowing and being in the meltdown and letting everything just fall away, and then you move on to this phase of, well, what could it mean? You know, how do I want to show up? How does she want to show up? And what would that mean for us going forward? And we're starting to shift from meltdown, and it was a gnarly meltdown phase, man. Like, I don't say that lightly. It was, we were both confronted with a lot. And I would say just knowing that you don't have to go the traditional route, and it's like, look, everything's on the table. And I mean that not from like bringing other partners in or anything like that, because we're in Austin and that's a very big thing here. So I want to be clear about that. But look, we get to decide what this is.
Yes.
And, you know, kind of opening the door to maybe this is just coming to an end. Yeah. And not wanting to ever touch that in the past, and really being able to sit with that, it took a lot of the fear out of what that could be. And I think it allowed me to just kind of like relax into like, we're both going to be okay no matter what. Let's just explore individually like what that feels like, and let's take some space from one another. And I think in the beginning of doing that, it was like, oh, whew. Ooh, it could, you know, I was thinking about all the benefits of like what that would be. And then once I got through the fantasy part of that, I've really gotten grounded into, you know, what do I want, you know? And I think that's a thing that's really difficult for us. You know, I don't know, I can't speak for women. I speak as a man. It's really difficult to feel that kind of selfishness of what do I want, but at the end of the day, it's going to serve everyone best. And it's not that they're going to take into account how everyone's affected, but it's what I've been sitting with. And I just feel really good about where Peyton and I are at right now, and the conversations that we're having the courage to have, because we haven't been able to have them in the past. It's been very defensive. It's me trying to explain, like, oh no, it's not that I wasn't showing up. It was, and it just gets janky. She doesn't care about any of that. She wants, again, back, like, who are you?
I love that you share that. It's 4-6 weeks ago, I think, was the moment where I very much had to choose, do I want to be in this relationship? And I was questioning. I went through this phase recently where I just questioned everything in my life. Like, we were talking about fitness before. There was one day I was standing, I was in the gym and I just stopped, and I just stood there for like 3 minutes, right? But a solid 3 minutes. I just stood there and I was like, do I actually want to do this anymore? Like, is this the person that I want to be? And I questioned everything from every label and identity and thought and belief and assumption that I was making. And a part of that was my marriage and being like, do I want to be with this woman? And I absolutely was like, yes, I do want to be with this woman, and I want to have my devotion to her. And yeah, at the start, it is gut-wrenching. Like it's like an absolute sucker punch to the gut of like this, the air's been taken out of me in this questioning absolutely everything. And I think it's easy to not go through that. And what I love with what you're sharing and what we can kind of open up into here is the necessity to have to question, to be able to open up into, well, what is it? Because I'm not joking, it was probably about a week before actually coming on this trip. I had this session with this lady, and then it was fantastic. And then she pointed out something that was really true that I hadn't let myself think of. And that was from kind of like selling the company last year and then wrapping up living in Bali, moving back to Australia, being this family of 6 now. And very much my wife, Lauren, she was like, and she admitted to it, and it was fantastic. And especially as a man, as a provider, she was like, she'd gotten everything that she said that she wanted. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it was all there. The girls are super happy in the exact school that we wanted them to get to. Like, it was picture perfect. And then I turned around and went, what about Chris? I hadn't thought about myself during this entire period. And there was this resentment that started to build inside of me as well. It was like, oh, like I've served everyone else. I feel like I've bled through my forehead for the last 10 years, which has been fantastic. But then for my wife to turn around and be like, thank you so much for the life that you've given us. That was like, oh, that was worth it all for me. I was like, oh, I'll bleed through my forehead for another decade to get that again sort of thing. But there was this, what does Chris want? And I had never asked that. I honestly, I don't think in my entire life, I truly asked and tried to answer that from myself. And if I could be really honest, I still can't answer that right now.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that, you know, for so long, I mean, for me, there was a resentment that I'm always fielding Peyton's needs. I'm always, basically, in the way I'm receiving that is I'm not meeting, I can't meet, like I'm doing the best I can. No one ever asked me what I need. I don't even know what I need, to your point, and that's like the, you know, some of the work we've done with facilitators. It's like you need to figure out what you need and then share that so she can meet you there. But if you don't know what you need, there's no way I can share what I need. And so that's been the really difficult thing of to really sit in what do I need? What are my needs? And I think we get so focused on providing for everybody else, and that's important, but we don't tend to our own needs. And then we have this resentment. Like, you're not meeting my needs. Well, she doesn't fucking know what my needs are. So how
never communicated them.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that's cultural. We're conditioned that way.
Yeah.
My dad never expressed his needs as far as I could tell. Men just did what they did, and they provided, and you know, I would say it wasn't as integrated as maybe men are trying to be today, but that was our model. And I think it's like really going in to those people that really influenced us and trying to take the nuggets from that and then doing it a different way. And you know, I'm glad you brought that up, and that's one of those things that again, I'm 51. I couldn't right now articulate what my needs are. I could get close, but it's a real challenge.
Really quickly, I love that you're joining us on the podcast. And if you haven't yet, I have a YouTube channel, which is our main hub. This is where we have all the episodes, so you can watch the conversations and join each episode to get all of the best content, the best insights. So click over to YouTube, go to the Christopher Dufey channel, as I would love for you to be able to join us there.
How do we figure that out? How do we help each other figure that out?
Part of it is, and you mentioned it earlier, like men aren't kind of gathering. I'm fortunate enough here in Austin, once a week I get together with a group of, you know, there's probably 12 of us, and we'll have 8 to 10 or 11 guys together. And it's very free flowing. There's no agenda. We just get together. We'll play pool, ping pong, play music, have a little food. We've incorporated a little workout beforehand. And then these little vignettes pop up all over. And so these conversations are being had. And that's an important first step of like expressing like what's going on, and being with men who can hold that container for you. The next step is to then really sit with what you need and then share with your partner.
One thing that came up recently with my marriage with Lauren was I did not know that I had a need to be nurtured. And for me, it was like the image of me like putting my shield and my sword down at the end of the day and being able to kind of be receptive and open to being nurtured, where before it was like, no, it was like, oh, I can't do that because I'm supposed to be the strong mountain. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I do use the imagery of like, I'm the mountain. Like my wife calls me the loving mountain, especially in our household with, you know what I mean, with 4 daughters as well. Like there's this very feminine storm that can wield around, but I'm unshakable as the mountain, kind of like being able to give some sturdiness. And I think I took that too far, where I was like, I have to be that 24/7, 365. I can't have anything wrong with me. And it was not that long ago where I had suicidal ideation come back up for me. And it was like, I've had depression before, and that was something I don't want to have to go through again. And I feel like, oh shit, I think it's coming back up for me. And I couldn't, at the start, I couldn't share it with Lauren. I didn't want to open up that vulnerability. And then it was soon after I had this insight where I was like, for love to be there, I feel like curiosity and vulnerability need to also be there. They're like these 2 other factors that need to be alive for love to truly be there. Like I want to be absolutely vulnerable and open to be who I am for love to be there with my wife, Lauren. And also I want to have the curiosity to always see her for who she is in that moment, not taking her for the previous Lauren that she wasn't being, that I know that I've done for so long, because I think that also leads into taking someone for granted, which then it just starts to fall apart.
Yeah, and that was the word I was looking for, nurturing. I said mothering, like my wife is an incredible nurturing person, and I just haven't allowed her to nurture me.
Oh, God.
Like yeah, our journeys are very similar in that way, and on some level I've wanted to, but I haven't had the courage to really allow her to. And I think that there is that idea that I don't want her to see my vulnerability, and kind of cognitively I understand that that's not the way to be, but I just haven't trained my body to allow it to happen. But I think there's real medicine in there for Peyton and I, for me to open up and allow for her to treat that little boy in me, because he's got some pain and there's some shame, and that's, again, we were talking about before we got on, kind of why we do the podcast. This is why I love doing the podcast, because this is a reminder to me. We get to work out and have a conversation, with us, it's 2 men, about these things that are really important, and it's just it's a real conversation that now I'll get to really go from here and integrate that, hopefully, and then actually take step towards what I ultimately would want for myself and for my relationship.
For me, it sounds like it's ridiculous going to come out of my mouth and sharing this, but it is what it is, and I want to share the truth of it. And it was like, for me, being nurtured was being able to put my head in my wife's lap and for her just to like give me a head massage. And just that act was soul filling for me, where I could just completely, at the end of the day, literally just be like, oh, and for her to be there and to be able to fully accept me for who I am in that moment. This is crazy. There's so much coming up. This is like a really great therapy session together. So thank you, Cal. I appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
How does this translate over to you being a father?
Just that little act of allowing her to just be tender with you in that way. It seems so subtle and so simple. It's a big chasm to get across for a lot of us, and I just kind of was picturing that. I think there's a little bit of like, oh, I don't really, she hasn't really been able to do that, but boy, would that feel really good, and like, what do I have to lose? And then there's just this like unsaid nurturing. It's not like she's, trying to provide some sort of therapy for me. It's just being present with that and almost like submitting, like opening up. And so I love that you brought that example up. Yeah, surrendering.
That comes up for me, that word, surrendering to it.
And I think that's the part that a lot of us are kind of missing, is that true surrendering into that experience or similar. As a dad, I've been able to show a fair amount of vulnerability in the sense that I can get super emotional in front of my kids. It happens, often, I would say. But there's a different part of vulnerability that I haven't expressed to them. And it's similar to what I was saying earlier, like that I don't have it all together. There's a fear that if I show that I don't have it all together, that it's going to create some sort of imprint on them, scarcity, like where we have plenty, but I'm like, oh, I'm feeling. There are things like that there's a delicate balance. You don't want to overshare with your kids. It's not their shit, but there does need to be this ability. Maybe, it's when Peyton and I are struggling and we're not fighting, but there's a tension. They feel all of it. And so just like putting words to like what's going on. Mom and I are working on some stuff right now, and it's so much of that is unsaid. And I think that's the true vulnerability. And it's like, you got to be really careful not to overshare because it's not their shit. But let them know that we are fallible and that we are always working, and it's okay. I think that's the part where I'm trying to move towards with my kids, because again, I've got the one piece of vulnerability down, and I think that's particularly important for my kids to see, whether it's my two boys or my daughter. But there's a deeper level that I haven't really shown them. And again, I want to be careful not to put too much on them, because it's on some level they're too young for some of it. But there's an opportunity there to let them into that part of me.
I love that, because for me, it's like there's this line to walk where it's, again, I don't want them to have to burden my shit, but also for them to be a meaning and to be words put to what is going on, for them to understand, and hopefully for them to have great models for them to be able to emulate and use, and to be able to kind of like seed into how they go throughout their life as well. It's interesting because my initial philosophy, I think, like unknown with parenting, was very much like, I just have to protect and serve and ensure that I'm the best person that I can be for them, but very much in the case of them not being exposed to the flaws. And I remember as well, and I think it's interesting because I want to think more deeply into this as well, especially because I have 4 daughters, but I remember very clearly a point in my childhood when I saw the flaws in my father. And it was interesting, and this came up a lot in like psychotherapy for me. And it was a case of, I lost a true model that I wanted to have someone guide me along. I felt like I never had someone really be like, you're on the right path, Chris. You're doing the right thing. Maybe look 2 degrees to the left. Like just having some guidance along there. And I think for me, it's now instilled this very much, I want to ensure that I have mentors in my life, and I'm looking for the right models of people to be able to be like, oh, like that's the way they're doing it, and therefore it helps me navigate myself through it as well.
Hola, I want to say a big thank you, muchas gracias, for listening to the show. Now, really quickly, this show is growing and it's all thanks to the ratings and reviews. So really quickly, I want to ask, if you have not left a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else that you listen, take the 30 seconds, please click on over, leave a review, as I really want to hear from you. And I want to know what is the best thing so I can cover in future episodes, what guests to bring in, what questions can I answer for you, what is it that you're getting out of being a part of this show as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this show's success. Thank you so much for clicking over, leaving a review. Now let's get back to the episode.
One of the challenges, I had a similar experience, I think we all do, with our parents. You know, my parents their relationship was struggling, and they were both kind of talking to me separately. I think I was in my early 20s. And it was like, whoa, my parents aren't perfect. You know, on some level I knew they weren't, but they also seem to always have the answers. And there comes that reckoning when that awareness, you know, comes about. And it's like, I want to get ahead of that, not because I want to be held up on a pedestal, but I think particularly my boys, like I'm kind of their hero. And I was saying that for any other reason that's what's been shared with me. And I don't want that. I want to be a model for them, but I don't want to be put up on a pedestal. I want them to know that the things that they see in me are in them too. But I need to expose them to some of those other sides of me. Like, this is the full me. And again, I haven't done a great job of that.
Yeah.
And I think that would really serve them well, to really just, like, you know, lower their shoulders and breathe a little bit around what, it doesn't matter what I share with them, my expectations of them. You know, I want them to find a career path that they just love doing, and really there's no pressure about school or going to college. There's none of that, maybe external pressure, but they're going to make up their own story about what they need to do to be successful living in a house with me. And I need to do a better job of really, again, not only just sharing the other sides of me, but really just letting them, and I will say I've done a pretty good job of letting them have their own journey.
Yeah.
And really encouraging them to follow the paths that are really interesting to them. But there's more work to be done with them getting to know who I am.
This just comes up for me. What's most important to you now in this stage and chapter of your life? What's most important to you now?
I would say it's that like getting into that true vulnerability, because when I don't, it's just like I'm just holding all this myself.
Like there's an incongruence?
Yes.
Yep.
And that's the hardest work for me right now, but that's the most important. I know there's so much on the other side of that, and it's just like having the courage to step in and again, probably like you, I love getting shit done, like let's go, and there's a patience, you know, and there's a process, and there's a being present with what's unfolding. And I do have bits and pieces of that in my life where things are just happening, and I'm able to, those things that are sitting outside and that may be grabbing my attention about future things that I'm maybe concerned about, that those just fall away, and I'm actually in the moment of a great experience with my kids or my wife. And I think it's like marrying those things, like being vulnerable, but not doing it for a particular outcome. It's like, okay, now I've done my vulnerability, we've gotten to this point.
It's
like
not
just,
a checkbox.
Yeah, it's just like stepping into it and feeling it out, and maybe it's a spoonful here and there. In you know, even last night I had an experience where I was in a float tank, and I had a conversation about shadow work and this whole idea that your shadow is really powerful if you're able to integrate it. And the guy I was talking with was kind of sharing like how you go through your shadow and how you work with it and how you just let it say all the things that you don't allow it to say. And I had such a powerful experience of just feeling what happens when my shadow wants to come out and I don't allow it to, and how weak I feel. And then as I, kind of played it out in my mind and let it express itself, and I was very clear. I wasn't a bully, but I said exactly what I needed. It felt incredible. And what I also recognized is I spent almost 20 years as a trader in Chicago on one of the exchanges, down on the floor doing all that. For 18 years, I got to express my shadow openly. It was welcome. And in the 10 years since, it hasn't come out really. It'll come out when it's like not appropriate.
Yep.
When I get triggered, maybe in a, particularly with my wife, but I haven't let him out. I haven't played in that space, and it's made me in some ways very weak. It's funny. I was talking to my daughter, and this, don't really, I guess there's a little bit of me that cares what people think, but I really don't care. My daughter's 15, she's amazing, and she can tend to swear like a sailor. And I was actually sharing with her last night the experience I had in the float tank, and I was talking a little bit about shadow, and I was like, I felt like, I was like a pussy, and I said, I need to be more cunty and not so much of a pussy. And there's like this idea of like being very direct.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be a little off-putting, but people actually want to know what you're thinking.
Yes.
And they can feel you holding back. And I've just thought about times quite recently when I've been holding back and I felt so impotent and ashamed. Like, what is wrong with me? Why am I afraid to say this? Like, I can do all these other things that take, real courage. And here I can't stand up to this person and say how I really feel. And that all came about last night. Like, okay, there's real work to be done around that shadow. So that's really important to me right now, is to really express in a way that is, integrated.
Yeah.
But very clear.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. So I love float tanks. I've been doing float tanks for like nearly once a week for the last couple of years. But I had one experience on a psilocybin journey where it suddenly became so apparent that I'm allowed to tell people what it is that I want. And I don't have to like do the things just to please them that is not serving me as well. And then that's okay, because everyone can get along really well when there is that communication that's had, especially when coming from a loving place as well. But how that directness is so important, because otherwise it's fluff and there's just a bunch of fucking around when it comes to this. And it's like, we can have a great relationship if we're both communicating to each other the way that we need to be as well. Because again, like resentment then starts to build.
Totally.
And that is toxic stuff. And then it's interesting when you bring up like the shadow work. I've done a lot of like Ken Wilber's shadow work. He calls it the 3-2-1 process, where it's like you bring something up that you may feel like is the shadow, or if you're getting triggered by something, and you work with it, like sitting in a chair in front of you, work with it in a third person, and then you bring it to a second person view, and then you bring it to the first person view as well. So that was something that's really interesting for me, like you actually wanting to integrate it in and it being a part of me, rather than it being this like external source that has too much of a subject-object relationship with myself as well.
Oh, I dig that. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to play around with that process, because that is the tricky part is, okay, where the shadow is, like, how do you truly integrate it?
Yeah.
And allow it to be there?
Yeah,
I think you nailed it. It's that communication. It's fluff, it's dancy, it's not authentic, and you can feel it in the air. And then what comes out of it for me is resentment. Like, fuck this person.
Yeah.
Fuck
It's
you
got
for making
nothing
me
to do
feel
with-
this way, right? It's their fault.
Yeah.
But then I'm, feel all this shame around it. Like, God, like, and it's like, I want to say grow a set of balls, but it's not about that. It's like, dude, be authentic. Like, what do you really want? What are you afraid of risking and expressing that? And I just, the kind of the person that I was playing this out with last night, I could just see it so clearly how, my shadow was like, you're fucking manipulating me right now. Maybe not entirely, but there's a part of what you're doing is you're manipulating me, and I'm allowing you to do that. And so that's on me, but I want you to know that I see this, and whatever agreement we have, like, I'm not okay with it anymore. You're not going to walk all over me.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm excited to really dig into that. I felt fucking awesome after that float last night.
I love that so much. Okay, beautiful. So we haven't even touched anything when it comes into your book coming up. So if I may, I will beg, plead and steal to sit down with you again when I come back here later in the year.
And then I would love to have you on my podcast when you come back. That would be amazing.
Appreciate it. That'd be really
There's
cool.
so much to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like we've only just scratched the absolute surface of what it is that we can get into. But what I appreciate so much from this conversation, Cal, was being able to sit and have another fantastic human being, another fantastic man as a mirror to be able to go, like, for me, so much of this conversation is like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one going through this stuff and trying to figure it out for myself, and we can do this together as well. And I think that's when it's important, because as you said, like, you coming together with a group of men every week and being able to have that space, there is something that I truly believe, I can really only talk for men, so I will, there is something that happens just through osmosis, just being around each other and having these organic conversations come up where suddenly it's like, oh, a lot of stuff that you've said has kind of like bubbled stuff up for me right now, where now I'm like, I'm going to take a good, long, hard think and use what it is that you've shared with me today. And I hope the listener and the viewer does that as well, because I think it's brilliant what you've shared. So I really appreciate it, Cal.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I agree. And I think we talked about this before we got on, but part of the reason I think we do this is to let people know that they're not alone in whatever they're doing. And a lot of that stuff is left unsaid. And unfortunately, a lot of men in particular don't have groups that they can share with. And it's a classic, you are, the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with. And so who you're surrounding yourself with and who you're having conversations with. So yeah, thanks for this. It's truly, I mean, you kind of joked about it earlier, but I know there's a lot of truth. This is a therapy session. It's for me to like work out like what I'm going on, getting it out of here. There's so much more when you actually speak the words, and then to go journal about it, really helps with the kind of moving through it. So thank you, brother.
No, I appreciate you so much, Cal. Where does everyone get to find out more about yourself and the brilliant work that you do?
Yeah, Instagram is cal.callahan. I have a website, thegreatunlearn.com, and then a podcast, The Great Unlearn.
Dude, okay. There is going to have to be at least a part 2 of most likely a part many of what's going to be happening. But I thank you so much, Cal, for being here, taking the time and attention. You're a brilliant human being, and I'm just really looking forward to getting to know you more.
Likewise, brother. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
I want to jump in and say thank you for listening and supporting the show, as at the moment we don't run any ads on the show. And if you're getting value, if you're loving the show, then I invite you right now to share this episode. Share this directly to a friend or share it on your socials. And when you do share it on social, please tag me so I can personally say thank you to you. My social handle is @Chris Dufey. That's Chris Dufey, as it means a huge deal to me, as this show is about us coming together as a community to help each other grow, as I really do believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. So take a screenshot, grab the link and share it with a friend that you think could get value out of this together. It will put a huge smile on my face, and I very much appreciate it.